Anyway, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our virtual walk and talk at the Wildflower Garden, the Ku-ring-gai Wildflower Garden special. The team there have organised a great program for the day with plenty of opportunity for questions from you. So Tom is the ranger at the Wildflower Garden, Mark's the nurseryman, Anna will be managing technology, and Megan will be holding the camera. We've had some recent experience with school children, with groups of school children virtually. So our challenge is to be less chaotic than a whole bunch of 7-year-olds, so that shouldn't be too hard. You're welcome to ask questions during the presentation. Just wave your hand and Anna will ask you to unmute, or I'll ask you to unmute. And you're probably all familiar over the past year with clicking on the microphone image at the lower left-hand corner of your screen to unmute, if you can see that one. It'll have a red line through it. Just if you click it, that red line will go. So there'll be more time for questions at the end of the presentation as well, but it'll be 3 sections we're doing that. Anyway, Tom will explain that. So over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Robin. Hello, everyone. So I'm one of the rangers here at the Wildflower Garden, and I'm here at the Visitor Centre to begin our little virtual walk and talk. I will just quickly introduce you to a delightful sort of friend of ours. Oh. This is young Lester, and he's got a brother called Clyde. You might recall the children's story, Lester and Clyde. And he's having a happy time here. He's growing big and strong. He's a green tree frog. And there's a couple of things going on at the moment with him. He's changed drastically in colour because he's shedding his skin. You might be able to see it on his back here. Can you see that line?
Oh.
That is his skin starting to come off, and he's a much deeper shade of green at the moment. Usually he's quite bright, and this is common with frogs, but I was really shocked and was remarking to my colleagues today how amazing that sort of little change can be. And he's also been cleaning his eyes, because the skin can get into his eyes if he's not careful. We've got to keep him nice and wet. So my hands, I gave my hands a good spray beforehand. And he needs his eyes for more than one reason, rather than just looking. He actually uses his eyes to swallow his food. And you may have seen this before, you might know already, but when they like to eat very large insects sometimes, that's why they have such a huge mouth. Helps them to eat those cockroaches and beetles that are huge. And when they swallow, next time you see a frog swallowing, look at its eyes, because it'll do a big blink like this, and its eyes will sort of disappear from its socket. And it's because the eyeballs are going back inside its skull and pushing the food down their throat. So it's an extraordinary adaptation. And yeah, we love frogs here at the Wildflower Garden. You can see them starting to emerge. Spring is in the air, and with spring comes insects and warmer temperatures, and frogs love these things. So it's a perfect time. If you can come and visit us in the flesh, keep your eye out for the little dwarf green tree frogs that are so popular around these parts. But I think Lester could, if you have any questions about frogs, please fire away. I think Lester could hog the whole presentation today. He's so cute. But I must keep an eye on the time. And feel free to tap me on the shoulder at any stage virtually if I'm banging on. But there he is, Lester the frog. Did we have any questions about him so far, or shall I move on to the next animal?
You can feel free to raise your hands or write them in the chat. Mary said it's fantastic to meet Lester in the chat. And Beverly, I see your hand up. If you want to unmute yourself, Beverly.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. What happens? What do they do in the winter? Do they hibernate?
Yeah, great question. It is a bit like that. They lay dormant, and there's a term for what reptiles do in Australia anyway, common behavior called brumation. And herpetologists believe that certain frog species do this. It's like think of it as hibernation light. And it's a way that they can shut down their systems. But to go even further, there are really extreme cases where frogs and toads can do extreme forms of physiological shutdown. And I think the best example is a frog that lives in Australia, actually in South Australia, I believe, their main population. And what they'll do is they live in land that is known to frost in the winter. And they'll make little burrows that are quite shallow and wait for the frost to come. And they actually have like antifreeze sort of chemicals in their cells. And it allows their bodies to actually freeze with their surroundings. So they become like little frog icicles until the seasons change. And just like the plants and the water bodies of water, they will start to thaw, literally. So they're weird and wonderful, the frogs, really hard to understand. And I love that, the beauty of the diversity of nature.
Thanks, Tom.
Where would they, just continuing on with that question, if I may,
Of course.
where in the garden would they, is it
Hibernate?
ruminate, did you say?
Brumate.
Brumate, yeah, brumate.
Yeah.
Where do they brumate? Do they brumate in under rocks, in high country, low country, in the winter?
Well, it really varies, yeah. Any sort of hiding spot
In the
that they can
wildflower
find-
garden I'm talking about.
Oh, in the wildflower garden? Yeah, in the bodies of water. And they've even
Oh,
been
right.
known to brumate just in really moist spots away from water as well, like mossy areas. Just anywhere that there's shelter and that they can, that they can hope is going to stay moist, as
good.
moist as possible.
Thank you.
But I think he's getting a little bit, frisky now. And
we
my
might-
hands
will,
are,
yeah, thanks, Dan.
so, but it is amazing to see them hop. It is,
Thank you,
it is
Beverly.
terrific.
Have we got another animal did you want to move on to?
Definitely. Whoop. Right,
Fantastic.
that's that. Good boy, fella.
Fantastic. I'll just see if there's any hands up if anyone else had a question about the frog, or you're welcome to pop it in the chat.
That'd be great.
Fantastic. Otherwise, we have another animal to show. And then we're going to take you on a bit of a wildflower tour after that.
Oh, yes, that's right. And my colleague Mark is going to come in. He's our plant expert.
So yes, save up your plant questions for Mark. All right. Now,
You've got to be a little bit more careful how you pick Noodle up. He's a little snake. And you want to be sure you're sending the right messages to him.
so what is Noodle? What type of python?
Noodles, this is a spotted python, a type of children's python. We always joke to the kids that they're not named that because they like to eat children, but because that was the name of the naturalist who sort of discovered them. His name was Dr. Children. But he's in great form at the moment. Noodles had a little mouse just a couple of days ago. And as he sort of slithers and writhes around, you might be able to spot where that mouse is now, digesting. A little bulge. And he's got all sorts of fantastic adaptations. And can you see on the side of his face here, as he's coming to check you out, I love to point out these little structures on the side of their mouth. Can you see those little indentations? He's pausing very patiently. Those little indentations are really critical for him. They're what we call heat pits. and they allow snakes like Noodle to sense their prey in pitch black conditions when there's not even moonlight to see them by. And his prey items, things like little rodents and little baby birds and things, they give off quite a bit of heat for their body size because of their fast metabolisms. So they stick out like fluoro to him or her. I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl. And what snakes like Noodle will do is wrap around a tree limb, just like he's wrapped around mine, and sort of hang down a little bit like this. And the best place to do this is outside the entrance to a cave, because little microbats will be dwelling in there, colonies of microbats. And when they come out of an evening to search for moths and nectar and things that microbats like to eat, he'll be using those heat pits to sense these heat signatures, little bats flying out of the cave towards him. And they'll almost hang there with their mouth slightly ajar, ready to whack them, wrap them up and constrict them, and then eat them head first and whole. So they're pretty impressive and specially adapted little predators. Did you have any questions? I saw there was a question, a later question about a frog, maybe, that came up.
Oh, yep. We might actually get Mark to talk to that as well, but it was about what do we need to do to attract frogs into the garden?
Oh, yes, that's right.
Edna Fairley here. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Edna, are you there? Did you want to ask a question?
Yes, if I might.
Yes.
With the little frog, is that threatened in our environment, or is it quite common?
Is it threatened?
Yes.
Great question. The green tree frog actually is, I believe, classified as least concern at the moment, because that particular species is it has a bit of a stronghold and is quite well adapted, quite stalwart and tough in terms of adaptability compared to other types of frogs and toads, because really they're what we call indicator species a lot of the time. What that means is if you have a healthy population of frogs and toads in a given ecosystem, it means that the health of that ecosystem is generally going to be spot on, because in terms of changes to the environment, pH, acidity, pollution, frogs are often the first to be threatened and the first to go. So it's a great question, and it is really worth knowing how to attract frogs, because if you do live in this area, for instance, Ku-ring-gai, we have in pockets of the ecology, we have a known critically endangered species that's endemic here called the red-crowned toadlet. And we always try and encourage people to create those conditions that are going to prop up their ability to survive.
Yes. We live in Bayview, and we have a little pond that we put in, just a plastic box, and it does very well. And periodically we'll have a marsh frog. That's the brownie one, and that. But we haven't ever seen any other frog.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Oh, definitely. You're doing the right thing. Just basically creating moist vegetative habitat for them. There are particular species of plants that Mark can probably speak to a bit more.
Right.
So he'll help you with that. But creating a moist, sheltered, vegetative backyard is the best way to go. Marsh frogs are just so well adapted for urban pond environments. But everything from just trying to create native habitat as well, native flowers, and bushes and hedges, just because it's a whole picture type of thing. And frogs, you can think of them a bit like the cherry on top of the cake or the sundae, because they're so fragile. They'll often be one of the last things to appear. First, you've got to attract the insects, and in order to get the insects, you've got to get the plants that generally attract insects, and maybe not as much plants that attract birds to pollinate them, things like that. So it's a sort of holistic picture. And
could someone help me with that, to suggest plants that we could put around the pond?
Yeah, specific species. Definitely. Well, I know Mark will cover that in much more detail. He's got brilliant knowledge about local ecology, and lots of plants that we actually grow and propagate here would be helpful for you.
We actually...
Thank you for that.
We've actually got a question in the chat, Tom, if you can hear me.
Yes.
In the chat, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So I heard a bit of that. So about snakes and which ones are venomous and when to walk in the bush.
Especially with children, when is safest to walk into the bush?
Okay. Well, the good news is, to the large extent, if you're a local in Sydney, you don't need to worry too much. Red-bellied black snakes, in terms of the Wildflower Garden and analogous walking spots around here, red-bellied black snakes are the largest venomous snake around here. They're very distinctive, big black snake. They are much more afraid of us than we are of them. So all you need to do, especially with children, to avoid any sort of hazardous circumstance, is to wear long pants, wear appropriate footwear like hiking boots, and stay away from walking through reeds and long grass around bodies of water, because red-bellied black snakes are actually frog hunters, and they'll be looking for those dwarf green tree frogs. So as long as you do those couple of things, you don't have anything to worry about, and you can enjoy.
We might move on to Mark, if we would like to answer some plant questions.
Excellent. And I'll get ready for our virtual walk.
Fantastic.
Over to Mark.
All right.
And I'll just put Noodle away to the side here.
Might just let Mark get settled in there, but if anyone has any particular plant-based questions, feel free to write them in the chat.
On over, mate. Okay, bye everyone. See you soon.
Bye, Ranger.
Okay, what's the rarest plant in the Wildflower Garden? We do have a few rare species. One is a tiny orchid, which is about 10 centimeters high, and it's called Genopleasium bowerii, which is, yeah, if you want to look it up, it's the Bowers midge orchid. And it's very tiny. It's got a green flower.
Right, about that. Now, did you want to share about some of the plants you have in the nursery?
Sure. I'll start with introduction. So I'm Mark Cowan. I'm the Ku-ring-gai Wildflower Nursery Officer here. and we're currently in the visitor centre, and the nursery is attached to that. We're currently not open for browsing, but hopefully we will be soon. But I'm just going to show you now some plants from our flower display, which is prepared by the Australian Plant Society. So I'll start with this one here in front of me, which is called Poltenia Stipularis, and it's a bush pea, and it's in the bean family or the legume family. It has really bright bunches of flowers on the tips in springtime, and you can see them here in the Wildflower garden. One interesting feature about this plant is they have tiny hairs covering the leaves, which can help with surviving dry periods. I guess it's an adaptation that it's developed. Yeah, it is insect attracting as well. So if you want to attract frogs to your garden, this one will attract insects, which could be a food source for frogs. So it likes a well-drained soil and a bit of protection from extreme conditions. It only gets to about 2 meters, so it's one that we recommend planting in the local area. Any questions, or I'll just keep going?
We've got a couple in the chat, Mark. So the first one is, what would be rabbit-proof plants? Can you suggest any rabbit-proof plants? Ooh.
Yes, that's difficult. I do suggest with rabbits and also wallabies to plant grasses, tough grasses like Lamandra and Dianella, which are both local species, and they can usually not interesting to rabbits and wallabies, but especially wallabies, they'll have the try of almost anything. So fencing your small plants off while they're getting established is pretty important. Just while they're getting established, so they can sort of grow their own roots and become a little bit larger, so they can handle a little bit of pruning. But yeah, good luck with the rabbits there. Yeah.
Challenge. Yeah. So there's another question. Where can we buy native plants during lockdown? And do you give out free plants to residents? That's the other question.
Well, the good news is you can purchase plants, native plants from us here at the Wildfire Garden. We have a contactless nursery online form, which you just have to go to our website and check our stock lists and go from there. And you can always email me.
I could send that list. It's a PDF, is it, or a Word document or something? I could send that list out to people who've come to the meeting. Okay.
Yeah, and also the second part was of the question, free plants. Currently, we don't supply free plants, but I can send you some links to some possible state government things that you could be interested in for that. There's also seen some sites online with Facebook communities who swap plants and give away stuff that they're in their garden. So yeah, it's worth looking that up as well. Okay,
That's good.
I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So this one is a very interesting species.
Beautiful.
It's one of our most popular plants when people do bushwalks here in the gardens, and it always draws a lot of attention. It's Ariesterman Australasius, the pink wax flower. Currently in our specimen jar, the flowers have closed up. So this would be how they would look after they've been pollinated or when the sun's not out. But they have 5 petals, and they're in the Rutaceae family, which is some other relatives as citrus. So like your oranges and the native finger lime. So these ones can be a bit tricky to grow in the garden, and you don't see them much in nurseries for sale. A few reasons for that. It is quite difficult to propagate and slow growing from seed and cutting, but they grow well here in the gardens in sandstone soils with a bit of protection from extreme weather and a cool root zone. So providing mulch or sandstone under the plants is a good idea for species like this and Peronias, which are related. Yeah, so that's Ariesterman Australasius, the pink wax flower.
Beautiful.
I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So this one in front of me here, I don't know if anyone recognises this one, but this is called Woolsea pungens. One of the common names is snow wreath, and it gets covered in these fragrant flowers in springtime, and they have a really nice perfume, like a honey scent. It's a shrub and grows on sandstone soils, and it's related to the Epacris family or the heaths. So yeah, it's another beautiful one that we have here that's pollinated by insects, and it is another one like our previous pink wax flower that can be difficult to keep alive in the garden for long periods of time.
Sorry, Mark, could you spell the name so that when we've got the list, we can look it up? Could you spell the botanical name? Or
sure.
repeat
So,
it?
WOOLSIA.
Oh, that's easy, yes.
And pungens, PUNGENS.
Okay, great, thank you. And Anna's put the list of, Anna's put the link to the list in the chat if anybody wants to check as well. Have a look at that.
The next one we're going to go to is Banksias. So this one here is Banksia spinulosa. So it's fairly common, this plant in the Wildflower garden. It's a shrub, and as you can see from this part here, this is the spent flower. So it's finished flowering now, and it's made up of hundreds of individual flowers. And this one you can see from the little black ends on here, it's called the hairpin Banksia. So it's been used for different purposes, for fire sticks, to filter muddy water, and as a hairbrush. This one is pollinated by a lot of different types of animals. You have native bees, bats, small marsupials. And so after these flowers have been pollinated, this flower stalk turns into a woody seed pod. So after that, they need a bushfire to come through, and that opens up the woody seed pods and releases the seeds onto the ground, and then they germinate and grow. So that's the Banksia spinulosa, or the hairpin Banksia.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions for Mark?
Yeah.
If you'd like to raise your hand. Otherwise, we might head out onto the trail shortly. But if you have any questions, pop them in the chat or raise your hand. Fantastic. All right, Mark, we might actually also mention that we're just about to launch free delivery for Ku-ring-gai residents throughout spring, and you'll be able to see more information about that from our website. Should be live in a couple of days' time. Or you can reach out to Mark. How can they reach you, Mark?
By email is great. So yeah, just head onto the website and you'll see an email there that you can contact me.
Yeah, fantastic. And the online nursery form for contactless delivery or collection is on the website as well, along with the stock list. Was there anything else you wanted to go through, Mark? We might head out on field.
Yep. Hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, we'll head out to the field to see some in the wild.
Well, yeah, if you're happy to stay with us in case we want a live plant ID. Thank you so much. All right, we'll head out into the fields. Hello, Ranger Tom out there. Fantastic.
Hello. Welcome to somewhere down the landed trail. Hope you can hear me okay. The wind's picked up a little bit since we were down here last. But I just wanted to show some of the examples of those amazing specimens that Mark indicated to us live on one of the trails. And we have a lovely little bank here to inspect. There's really 3 or 4 main species around here. There's Ariesterman, Grevillea speciosa, and also Grevillea buxifolia. And also to boot, we've got a Banksia and some Leptospermum as well thrown in the mix. But I just wanted to highlight to you the importance of the interrelationships between what Mark indicated, the pollinators and the flowering plants themselves. It's so important. They shape each other's evolution. The plants are always trying to get better at alluring the insects and the birds, of course, and the other pollinators, and the bees and insects are trying to get better all the time at deciphering which plants are going to be best for them in terms of siphoning the nectar, and for bees, even better the pollen a lot of the time. And just around here, this particular species, this bank, you can think of this is very akin to, in human terms, for a street that is lined with cafes, restaurants, and cake shops with windows full of treats that are trying to allure humans. And they each are differently designed because it helps to give them a competitive advantage between each other. Some people like lemon cakes, some people like pastries, and so on and so forth. So, and I've got some bits of paper here to help highlight these species. This is the Ariesterman that Mark examined. These are beginning to open here. And along to my left, we have the buxifolia, which are lovely little delicate species of Grevillea. You may have these around where you live. You can even see from this example, I'm not sure if the color's just right, but the stamen and the anthers are designed such that they're trying to sweeten the deal for insect pollinators, for bees, because these types of plants, they have little bits of nectar, but they have even less pollen. and pollen is too expensive and valuable to waste. So they need little mechanisms that sort of trap the pollen inside. And the only thing that can unlock those pollen traps is a key. And that key is typically particular species of bees and beetles who can siphon the pollen and bring it back to their nest for their own purposes, but also, of course, go on to pollinate other specimens of the same species. So that was the buctifolia. And in terms of pollination, a curious example is these casuarina trees. They might not look spectacular at the moment. They're kind of special because they're known to be able to pollinate themselves, which is kind of a neat trick. And there are other species, some species of orchids are known to do this as well. But it's a handy trick if you don't happen to have any native bees that live on your aside from them, we also have the Banksia over here. And you can see, as Mark sort of touched on, these little hairs are like the remnants of the flowers that they had developed. They would have had little bits of nectar at the ends of them to attract those pollinators. And now that they have hopefully pollinated successfully, they've had the other genetic information from the other Banksias in the area, that now the seeds are starting to emerge, the fertilized seeds. And who knows, it could be many, many years before these particular seeds end up germinating in the ground. But hopefully they do in this area for years to come. How much is that? But if you had any questions about this bank or any of those interrelationships I touched on, feel free to ask now. We will cut back to Mark in a moment too, and then we're going to take you down to another special spot on our trail where you can see the home of one of our most amazing pollinators in the whole park. And I'll leave that a bit of a mystery for now. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yep. You can either raise your hand or pop yourself off mute if you have a question for Ranger Tom or for Mark. Or Edna. Oh, I just have to pop you off mute there, Edna. If you can press the little microphone button.
You got it? Edna? Edna, you just need to push that's the one. Just click the little microphone image in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. It's got a red line through it. Just have a look. There's a little sort of looks like an old-fashioned microphone.
Oh, yep. There you are.
Good.
Hello.
Thank you. Yep. Oh, no.
Oh.
No, still not coming up.
Oh, we still can't hear you.
Just while we're waiting, I'll highlight
Oh,
as
no,
well.
we can,
no, she's-
hold on. Tom, we can hear her.
We can hear you now. Good.
How easy is it to grow native plants? So we live in Bayview, and we have to bring in all the soil practically for every native plant that we put in. Now, if we go to a nursery and we buy a big bag of native soil, how long does that maintain a plant? You know, I imagine the roots just have to grow as far as that soil is there, or do they adapt?
Mark, that would be for you.
Good question.
Really good question. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that they will adapt eventually to the conditions that you have there already, whatever soil you have. But it is a good idea to add some potting mix or fertilizer when you're planting a plant to give them a good head start. It's not necessary, but yeah, it is. I don't think you do need to keep adding to it, but watering and fertilizing will benefit the plant, and you probably get a better looking plant. and it may not struggle as much. But yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yes. Well, we'll keep on trying. Only we have a few disappointments, I might tell you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's the name of the game with gardening. It's a lot of trial and error, but yeah, good luck.
all right. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you,
And
Edna.
this on one
And
of
just to add to that,
CWA
Mark,
members.
the people often wonder, you know, why is it so hard to replicate in my own garden? And it's because it's really hard to get the chemistry just right, all the conditions. You know, again, Mark can speak to this a bit more detail, but if you just look down here on the floor, so we're attracted to the flowers, but here you've got this rather, it's not very aesthetically pleasing, but you've got a decaying moss. And this is just a little highlight of the relationships that the plants are relying on. They rely on the fungi beneath the soil. They're breaking down this detritus and basically creating the nitrogen that they need to supply their flowers with pollen. So that's why it's so important to fertilize your soils and get the right nutrients inside. But it's also a matter of getting the balance right, because as I understand, some of the flowers that people love to grow need just the right amount of nitrogen, and they're sensitive to particular chemical compounds. So it's a really tricky one. And Mark, as you mentioned before, the Ariesterman and the Epacris, the Wolfsia pungens, tricky ones to get in that Goldilocks zone.
That's right.
Nick,
Yeah,
so,
they do have a relationship with fungi in the soil. So that could be a possible reason why some fail or don't live for a very long time. But I do recommend mulching is very important. So that's one way you can introduce fungi and bacteria into your soil, into your garden.
okay, Nick has a question, I think. Is that right, Nick?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I just wondered how we stop brush turkeys pulling up our new plants.
Oh,
Brush
that's a
turkeys.
question. That's a bit of a political one, isn't it, Mark? Because the brush turkey,
Yes.
it's hard for people like us to speak out against the brush turkeys, isn't it?
Yeah, they are a protected species, so we can't do anything to hurt them. But there are ways to discourage them. You can put a tarp or something to cover a nest if it's gotten that far in your garden to dissuade them not to continue with the mound. But using heavy mulches like stones or rocks around plants that are newly established plants or plants that are just starting, or your favorite plants, placing rocks around those so they don't get dug up is a good idea. Also, there is another option where you can lay down wire, which they don't like to scratch on. But yeah, it's an ongoing issue. They mostly nest in the warmer months of the year. The other times they're not as active, but yeah, if you follow those few things, it'll probably cause less damage to your plants. And yeah, keep your plants healthy and watered in dry periods is another way to keep them protected. And I hope that answers the question.
Mark. Fantastic.
And if it helps your perspective, if a brush turkey is sort of mucking with your activities, just to make yourself feel better, you can acknowledge that you're part of the ecosystem of your neighborhood, and hopefully the brush turkeys aren't mucking up everyone's gardens, and they're not, overpopulating and scavenging. But if they're living a natural sort of lifestyle, your garden might just be the sacrificial lamb to allow that fungi that we talked about brush turkey nests are like epicenters, like breeding grounds for fungi. And having one around is really beneficial to the other flowers and plants surviving. So that's one of the pluses, but it's still pretty annoying.
I've had 5 brush turkeys in my garden at one time. They visit every other day.
Must be a good nest maker in there. Maybe you've got some females who are very
No
interested
nest,
in
no nest,
male's
no
nest.
nest. Yeah.
Great question,
Excellent.
Mark. Nick, sorry.
Shall we move down?
Yeah, great idea. Are you going to walk through the garden a little?
For this.
Beverly has a question. Beverly has a question. Did you have a question, Beverly? Yeah.
Nick, I don't suppose you've got a rice flower that you're passing, have you?
Hi, Beverly. I don't have a rice flower in front of me, but I do have something similar,
Right.
which is an Australasius, but it's a red form, which is different to the local white form.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, I want to thank you for helping Manly CWA, where I'm the Agricultural Environment Officer, and Edna, whom you spoke to, is actually the Agricultural Environment Officer Assistant. She's second in charge. And we sort of, there's Northern Beaches, a lot of Ku-ring-gai, Lower North Shore people in Manly CWA, and they study a different flora, a different fauna and a different foe every year. And all the CWAs throughout New South Wales study the same one. The planning's done 2 years ahead by voting, each branch voting. So you'll be hearing from us from now on. I think Edna might be taking, we're only allowed to be in the one job for 3 years. They're all volunteer jobs, of course. So I think Edna's going to be taking over next year. So thank you for your help this year.
Thank you very much. It's good to see the face to the voice.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Beverly. All right, let's see where. Oh, did you want to show that plant, Mark?
Yes, I've got it here. This one is Australasius diosmifolium, but it's called red gingham. So it has a red flower, which is different to the local species. It's a shrub, and it benefits from pruning after flowering. But yeah, you can keep these flowers as dried flowers for cut flowers, and yeah, they're good for a sunny spot with well-drained soil. And yeah, make sure you mulch your plants for the upcoming summer period. But yeah, that's a beautiful one that we have currently at the nursery, which is a nice one.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. We might go to Tom. Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Hello. We're back on the trails. This is the wonderful Smith track, an absolute favourite of, I think, most of the rangers here. There's so much to see. The path is mostly sandstone all the way, and it snakes back behind the education centre, and you end up on the other side by Kaylee's Pavilion. It's a wonderful, rather accessible track. And we've just come off the Solander, which is the one that runs by the visitor centre. So that's how you get here if you're visiting us. And there's wonderful examples here of some of the flowers that we've mentioned already. This is the Grevillea speciosa. And in fact, there's an even more impressive specimen just here. I'll use my sleeve as a bit of a contrast, but you can really see them in bloom. And these are quite a delicate Grevillea. Again, they are adapted better to attract insects because of their delicate structures and the way that they trap their nectar. They're not great pollen producers, but they have a lot of nectar. So they're terrific. You see all sorts, and the further you go along here, there's also some Epacris down to my left as well. And further along the trail, there's some Baronia and Crowia as well, some of those pink, lovely, dainty pink flowers. But there's something back here. There's a secret little spot that I would love to share with you whilst we're in this part of the park. It's a little rocky outcrop, and there's great examples of flowers in bloom, a good vista as well, but also there's the home of a really special creature, what I alluded to before, and they're called the Peacock Carpenter bee. We have some pictures of them that we'll put up soon, but I'd just like to take you with me actually. So I might just grasp this camera and bear with me for a moment. We'll go in off the beaten track and I'll show you these mysterious nests that they make. I hope the camera is tracking okay. Can you see that clearly enough, Robin?
Yes.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Yep.
Yes.
Really good. Yep.
Excellent. So we've got
that gorgeous one.
got some lovely Ariesterman, and that large flower in the background, it belongs to a grass tree or a xanthorea, which are incredible flowers in their own right. Probably one of, if not the most impressive flower, I think, that you can find in our park. And there's two examples of the homes that I wanted to share with you. And I just quickly pan. This is a special spot around here. Down here to my right, there's an excellent example of the Peacock Carpenter bee's home. And I'm just going to make sure I don't stumble down here. But it's really worth checking out because these bees are, I think they're the second largest bees on our continent. And they have a curious habit. Can you see that clearly enough?
Perfect. Yep, that's perfect.
Excellent. So it's this grass tree down here that's growing this extraordinary flower. And what the carpenter bee will do, and perhaps now is a good time just to show an image, if you've got it there, Anna, of the bee itself. Yeah, that's right. That's the bee on the left. As its name would indicate, the peacock coloring, the iridescent blue into green, is remarkable. And it's I think it's a real sort of white whale of this park. If you can spot a peacock carpenter bee, you should really count yourself lucky. And if you can see, just from my point of view now, the nest, the male will actually make this nest and the female will deposit the eggs. And what happens is they burrow into this soft sort of lignified structure here, the stem, and they will go straight down. And they will make up to 3 or 4 chambers, in each of which they will deposit a single egg. And then they will cover each pod up with a plug that is made of mostly pollen, a little bit of nectar, and their own saliva. And when the larvae hatch from the eggs, they will begin to eat that plug that their mother has deposited, and they'll get bigger and fatter and eventually start to metamorphosize just like a cicada or perhaps a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And then they'll emerge as a fully grown carpenter bee. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but you can even see little scratch marks from the mouth parts of the bee. So I'm not sure if that's coming through in quality, but it is a superb adaptation. And these bees, they don't need a queen. Each female carpenter, peacock carpenter bee is her own queen. They are known as solitary bees, and they mate sexually, just like mammals or other insects do. And then they will create these amazing little habitats.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Edna have a question. Edna?
Yeah, I just want to say, go the girls.
Girl power, definitely. Yeah, they really are impressive.
Yeah.
And they're bigger than the males, the peacock carpenter bees, so very formidable. And yeah, just to give you a bit of a view of the vista around here, maybe we take a couple more questions.
Nick, did you have a question?
Yes, I have. I purchased a bee hotel from a local shop, and I put it up on a southeast facing wall about 3 or 4 months ago, and nobody's visited my hotel yet. So what am I doing wrong?
Excellent question. I love that you asked this, because we always encourage people to do it. And I'll quickly answer it before there's another little point. So a really hot tip is to change the location of the hotel every so often, maybe every spring, just to increase the chances that insects are going to notice it. Some people paint their nests with bright colors. I'm not sure if that actually makes a difference, but something that you can really do to help is take a little square, a few 3 or 4 squares of carpet, and stick it to the inside of the roof of the nest box and to the tops of the walls, because this will prevent other types of animals from setting up shop in there, like mud wasps and things. So you really want to attract the bees to the chambers themselves that you're wanting them to inhabit.
Might we also share this, Tom, if it's of interest to people from one of our sessions?
Excellent, yeah.
In creating a solitary bee hotel as well.
Very good.
Some little things.
Brilliant, yes.
For solitary bees.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I'm just making my way now back to the track.
Edna, did you have another question there? Edna,
I do have a question. Yeah, thank you. I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Should we put more than one bee hotel in our garden? Would that be better?
Yeah, as you can see from that example, that photo that Anna just shared, I think the more the merrier. Just as many as you're willing to install is the best amount in different locations in your garden. Because I'm not an apiarist, I'm not a bee expert, but I think giving them variety and different locations, because you can think of how difficult it is to put it in human terms again, talking about restaurants and cafes and cake shops. It's hard enough choosing what table you're going to sit at a restaurant, if that makes sense. So for bees, it's hard for us to put ourselves in their shoes and decide which has the best aspect, which has the best wind direction, the breeze that comes along. Hive-making native bees, the Tetragonula genus, they are really sensitive to temperatures. So they like to be in spots where they're going to get at least some sun rays, some aspects to warm them up in the morning and keep them warmer at night. So things like that are really important.
Would it be useful to have it somewhere near to a food source, or do they travel distances anyway between the food and the home?
Oh, that definitely sweetens the deal. Yeah, if you have some specialist insect pollinating plants, that really helps. And bees, they love pollen. So the two main attractors that flowers will have for bees are nectar, which is sugary carbohydrate food, and pollen, which is like bodybuilding, high in fat and high in protein. So bees really love pollen, I think, the most because it's rarer and more valuable. And nectar keeps them going. And they can use both, and they love to eat both. But if you can find some of those plants that Mark's talked about that are pollen producers, especially things like orchids, if you can get an orchid to grow, it's a treat in itself. But the bees will love you for it. But it's not just orchids, other flowering plants that are known to produce pollen.
Yeah, acacias or wattles are good pollen producers. So there's a range of local wattles or acacias that you can plant to give them, to provide a pollen source.
Excellent.
Fantastic, great question. Does anyone else have a question? Or Edna, I do see you've got
Yes,
another one. So
I seem to be asking lots of questions, but if that's
No,
okay.
it's great.
Look, I just want to revise a little bit. Low phosphorus soil is what we're after for a native garden. And does that go for all the peninsula? Is it like all of Ku-ring-gai Chase and all down to us, down to the water?
So your question was, are the local soils low in phosphorus? Is that?
Well, that's what the natives seem to need, is it?
Yeah, so a certain amount of species are sensitive to high levels of phosphorus. So things like Banksias and Grevilleas are sensitive to high levels of phosphorus, and yeah, the soils, the sandstone soils locally have generally low levels of phosphorus. So yeah, care is needed to be taken when you are planting natives. In saying that, not all native plants are sensitive to phosphorus like Banksias and Grevilleas, but if you have them in your garden, it's a good idea to use low phosphorus fertilizers as well, just in case.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic,
Thank you for that.
you.
I've learned heaps this morning.
Oh, that's great, Edna. I'm glad to hear. Now, Tom, was there anything else you wanted to show in the field? Otherwise, we might wrap up with another couple of questions after you, if you have one more thing to show.
Everything.
Good talking to me.
Yeah, you want to?
Oh, anything else? Yeah, actually, just on that question we had about the bee hotel, just a really fun idea as a gift in this time, tricky time being in lockdown, and Christmas is not too far away. Really great gift idea, apart from plants, of course, from our nursery, is either a bee hotel or an artificial nest box. Because Ku-ring-gai is pretty good, but on the whole, when we make places for us to live and shops and things, sometimes we forget to leave places for animals to live. So artificial nest box is a really fun present that you can give that's sustainable and also contributes to the local ecosystem. And it's a really fun family activity too. So if you've got kids or grandkids or friends, they don't have to have a big backyard. All they need is even a balcony, just a tree that's growing, for them to attach an artificial nest box. And it's a really fun way that you can give a gift that sort of keeps on giving, so to say. And it's really encouraging for everyone. You can talk, it's a talking point, and it can really maybe bring a cockatoo or a sugar glider or even carpenter bees and nest making wasps as well. So yeah, that's a really good gift idea. Please look into it. You can buy them online, really cheap these days, made out of sustainable materials, wood, and attract some animals that you'd like to have in your backyard.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Were there any other final questions before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Yeah, Edna. Edna, yeah, of course. Go ahead, Edna.
You are so faint, I can hardly hear when you talk to me. But it's okay. Look, just want to say, as Beverly said, there's 3 of us from Manly CWA here today, because I noticed Pamela Dodd-Mart in the group as well. So we just want to say, well, thank you very much for having us along, and you'll probably see more of us. So
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. Yeah, and it's been a pleasure doing this. It's given us something to do. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and yeah, please, anytime.
Gillian's got a, sorry, Tom, Gillian's got a question as well, I think. Gillian Stegman.
Just a quick call for the future. I'm very much hoping to have a garden group that I take on tours, and I was hoping to go to the Wildflower garden because it's in our LGA. Is there any way I can get help with special tracks that maybe people aren't used to, that just makes a bit more interesting than perhaps if people just meander through? So it'll be for either later this year or early next year. Is someone I can contact just for super tips?
Definitely, yeah. Anytime during the hours of 9 till 4 during the week, or 10 till 4 on the weekends, just call the visitor centre here at the Wildflower Garden.
Perfect.
And it'll usually come through to myself or one of my colleagues. Anna is one of the other main rangers here at the garden. And we can direct you to the places that you need to go that are seasonally relevant. At the moment, of course, we're on Smith Track. So if you're coming anytime
I've written that down.
yeah, that's a really good one. Solander as well is just a wonderful general tour because it's got bitumen track all the way around. It does a virtual circuit around the property, and also it's great for access. And the only other one, I think, the 2 other sort of must-see locations are the census track, because of how convenient it is, and you feel very immersed as soon as you get in there. And there's wonderful signage and interpretation, things to look out for. And also there's a pond and a manicured garden. It's called Kaylee's Garden and the pond. They're terrific. And it gives you a little bit of a different feeling. It's because it's manicured and it's got some species that aren't exactly endemic. It helps you to get a good contrast of everything else that you're seeing, and good points of interest as well. So Kaylee's Garden, Smith Track, and probably Kaylee's Garden in the Pond and Census Trail as well are must-sees.
Excellent. That's super. Thank you.
No problem.
If I could just say something.
Yeah, Beverly.
I would just like to thank, as a resident and ratepayer of Ku-ring-gai, how privileged I feel that to have Robin Hall and your crew, your team, and the people who work at Ku-ring-gai Wildflower Garden. It's absolutely, our lives are so rich for having folk like you. And thank you very, very much. And everyone keep warm, keep safe. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's encouraging and heartwarming. That's great.
Fantastic. One last question from Nick. Thank you, Beverly. It's very kind.
Yeah. Thanks for this presentation, Robin, and your team. I'd just like to point out that there's some wonderful wildflowers in Ku-ring-gai National Park right now, especially if you go down the old Bobbin Head Road. And if you're in the Hornsby LGA, there's some wonderful stuff above Galston going along Collingwood Ridge and Cobar Ridge. It's just absolutely wonderful stuff. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thanks, Nick.
Excellent.
All right, we might finish up there.
Okay, yeah, I think we're we reached the end, I think. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming along, and thanks for the Wildflower team, Tom and Anna and Mark and Megan in the background. So yeah, it was really nice and great presentation, beautifully done. So thank you. And yeah.
It's
We
been a
may do it
joy. Anytime. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. We will. Okay. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Thanks everybody. Okay. I know. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Oh, God.
All right.
Yeah, right.
Oh, Barbara, you do it? No, she's gone.
No, I'm just saying thank you. It was
Oh,
very
right.
good.
Okay, great. Thanks, Barbara.
An end meeting call.